Thank you all for being here tonight. It's a pleasure to be with everyone. This is our third gathering. So welcome to those who are returning. Welcome to those who are here for the first time. The previous healing rooms, we discussed many different topics. But in general, the reason why I created this space to come to is because I wanted to simply share many revelations that I have received over 30 years of being on a spiritual path, and quite a difficult spiritual path, I would say. I've worked with many people, and I haven't met that many people that have had the challenges that I've had to deal with. So at this point, after all those years, I'm quite grateful for all the experiences I've had. I wasn't very grateful going through it because my mind kept dropping into the idea of pain and suffering and victimhood. But I realized once going through these experiences and coming out of the spiritual birth canal over and over again, or rebirth canal, the value that I received from these many dark night of the souls is worth everything. Everything. Because even though the challenges are so great, the rewards are much, much greater. And so this world that we live in, what I call the illusion or the Maya of third dimensionality, doesn't really give us a lot of space and opportunity to go through transformation. A lot of it is about stopping us from going through these spiritual birth canals and distracting us and suppressing our pain and our suffering. And, so much of our medicine is about aborting our spiritual experiences. And I was fortunate that I couldn't take Western medicine, so I had no choice but to go through these experiences and utilize various tools that I picked up along the way to help soothe my soul while going through these experiences. And so at this point, because of my many experiences, I now hold space for others to go through these spiritual crackings, these breaking points, because the ego wants to keep us in a place of what is familiar and what is known. It's very afraid to go into the abyss of nothingness. But we were born to expand beyond our comfort zone. We're born to break through our identity, these limited aspects of ourselves that we generated very early on to survive life. We're not here to survive life. We're here to thrive beyond the beyond. But in order to get to this place of thriving, we have to go through many deaths. The breaking of the shell of who we think we are, the constructs we've created to survive life, the defense mechanisms that we put into place in order to not feel the pain and suffering within us. And so I call it the healing room because my perception is that we're here to heal, to become whole again, to collect all those fragmented aspects of ourselves and bring them back into the present moment. Because so much of what happens when we are wounded in the past, whether it's this past or past lives, so much of what happens is we disconnect and we dissociate. And so a main part of the healing process is to recollect our many parts and to remember who we are as a soul in this reality, in this temporary vehicle, with this temporary mind, with all of its many, many thoughts. And so the first step on this path is always, I am not my mind, I am not my thoughts, I am not my body, I am not this world. all these things are mechanisms. They're tools, they're facets of our soul. And the soul incarnates in order to have experiences, many, many experiences. And so the key is not to get attached to these experiences, but to use the mind, its thoughts, the body, this world as a tool for raising one's consciousness, for knowing one's self, capital S, the true self, the soul self. And so when we wake up and that we are aware that it's not about what we think it's about, this world, when we wake up to the realization that I'm not taking any of this stuff with me, I'm not taking my body, I'm not taking my mind, I'm not taking all these possessions, I'm not taking these people with me when I leave this world. When we contemplate, what is it I'm actually going to take with me? What actually is important? Then we begin to unravel, because everything you think that was important, everything one thinks that I am, one realizes I am not. And so if I'm not all these things, and this world isn't what I thought it was, then what is it? What's the point? What's the purpose? And that's the daily contemplation. What is the point of my life today? What am I here to experience today? And for this reason, I've written these 7 contemplations. Well, I can't really take ownership for writing much of these things, because as a clairvoyant and a clairaudient, I receive information. And one day my inner voice said, we'd like you to write the 7 contemplations. Never heard of it before. So I sat down and just allowed the information to pass through me. And these 7 contemplations really, I didn't realize it until I completed it, but I've been using them throughout my whole life. And that is how I've been evolving myself, how I've been getting back to the place of neutrality, to the witness, the observer, because it's the observer that has all the power. So within these 7 contemplations are kernels of wisdom that can be received, but only if you contemplate them. Because when we read things from our conscious mind and think, I got it, I read it and I got it, you ain't got it, because it's so multidimensional and so multifaceted. Like the first contemplation, it's all an illusion. It's all an illusion. So I can grasp that with my conscious mind, but what exactly does it mean? And on how many levels is there information trying to inform me of the depth of that truth? And it doesn't mean that this world doesn't matter because it's an illusion. It matters very, very much, because it's only in this illusion, in this reality, that we can achieve higher consciousness, because the illusion is so strong. The perception of duality, of me versus the other, of me versus nature, for example, of me versus a germ. The idea is so real. We think it's so real. And so if we're able to wake up in this illusion and then utilize all this, the muck of this world, all the suffering of this world, if we can utilize it for our own transformation, then we got what this world is about. We get to play in this game of life as a conscious, awakened soul. Does it mean there's no suffering? Does it mean there's no pain? No. But we have the tools to transcend it. We have the tools to transform it. But he or she who is not awake doesn't have the opportunity to step into this reality and cultivate a spiritual garden from this place. And so people end up in this tremendous state of fear, which fosters the illusion, which fosters separation, duality, otherness, as opposed to oneness and unity consciousness. So it's always important to have these tools for the mind to work with, to be able to process the challenges of this world and use it to be initiated into the next level of consciousness. Each time our ego identity cracks, right? It's like, this is me, this is the shell around me, this is who I am, this is how I operate in the world. And then you're challenged by something. You're faced with something quite significant, and your ego doesn't know how to deal with it. The only way to deal with it is if it cracks. It has to break. And then there's more space. Then there's more awareness because of that suffering, right? And then you form this new shell around yourself. And now this is my identity, which is another trap. It gets comfortable. Your ego gets comfortable in knowing yourself at this level. And then again, it goes through some trauma, some drama, something that challenges its reality where it has to crack again. And then there's no aura, there's no sense of self until it formulates yet a new sense of self. And then you get comfortable in this new space. So this journey is a continual cracking of the limited identity, the ego self, as we evolve into the greater self. And ultimately, the ego is simply open, freedom, no limitations, no separation. We move from that limited, fear-based, othering consciousness, right? Separation, duality, to unity consciousness. That's the goal. It takes many, many lifetimes to achieve this. Call it enlightenment. Many lifetimes. But it is possible, especially in this lifetime, because of how fast everything is moving. We have the opportunity to receive so much grace right now if we are ready, willing, and able to let go of our limited self thoughts, beliefs, ideas about ourselves, about others, about reality, about God, about everything. And so it's going to require all of us to really look at the spiritual mirror, to look into this mirror, especially if you've done a lot of spiritual work, especially if you know a lot. That can be the greatest trap, because then the mind goes to the spiritual ego, and that is the most difficult one to crack. Very, very difficult. I'm fortunate that I have a teacher within me. I call it the voice within. And whenever I start to veer off the path, simply a question is asked of me. Simply a simple question is asked, and it puts me right back into place. So I am fortunate that somehow I have this grace and this inner voice and teacher that helps me walk the razor's edge so I don't fall off. But so many get to the edge of the cliff, right? They get to the edge of the cliff and think they've arrived. But there's always another cliff to jump off of. There's always another thing to surrender and let go of. And so the 7 contemplations is one of those tools to sit with and utilize on a regular basis that we can begin to dissolve this mind, these thoughts, this ego identity, and slowly but surely climb the spiritual mountain and begin to realize the true self, the soul self, and fulfill our karmic path, right? We can't skip any paths. We can't skip any steps on this journey. Impossible. Anyone that sells you anything that says they can is false, unfortunately, because we each have our we each have our baggage to carry, and we each have to sift through it and move through it. And we become greater because of this stuff. The lotus becomes more beautiful because of the depth of the muck. So the more challenges we have, the greater the possibility for spiritual realization. And so watch out for the pitfalls on the journey. And some of these pitfalls, one of these major pitfalls, is this idea of suffering. And contemplation number 4 is suffering is a perspective, right? Suffering is a perspective. So the Gautama Buddha said, there is suffering. It's simply a fact. It is part of the reality that we are living in. We're going to experience challenges, and we're going to experience it as pain and suffering. So I took it to the next level of suffering is a perspective, because if we anchor into our perception of what the suffering is, then we perpetuate our suffering, and we dig ourselves deeper into a hole. So the key to working with challenging experiences is to surrender into the suffering, to surrender into the pain. An example of that could be when you're receiving body work, and the body worker is massaging you and gets to a point that's like really painful. And the masseur may say, just breathe deeply into it. And the body's tendency, your tendency is to contract, to resist. And then the more pressure that is brought onto that point, the more painful it is. But when I surrender into the pain, and I breathe into it and I allow it, then it releases. So the surrendering into the experience is one of the key elements to transcending suffering and one's perception of suffering. Once I went to my dentist, and I needed a root canal. So he comes close to me with his chair and the needle for Novocaine. And I said, no, I don't need any Novocaine. I don't take any Western medicine. My body can't handle it. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm going to do a root canal on you. I said, yeah, it's okay. Just do the root canal. And he's like, looking at me like, what are you talking about? You're going to do a root canal without Novocaine? I said, yeah, just do it. And so I lay down, and it took about, 20 minutes or so, and it was all done. And he just kind of like steps back and goes, not only did you not flinch, it was as if you were on a beach meditating somewhere. And I said, I just brought my consciousness to a different place, and I expanded my being so that I wouldn't feel the contraction of the pain. I allowed my whole body to experience the thought of pain, because it's simply a feeling, right? I'm simply having a feeling in my tooth. But the average mind wants to make a story about it, wants to give meaning to why this is happening. I am having a painful experience, but I simply shifted my mind. I shifted my perception to allow my whole being to experience this sensation. I didn't call it pain. I called it a sensation. And so I felt it deeply in the moment. I allowed it to be what it is. And therefore, it wasn't painful. Because the reality is the Novocaine is just covering up what I'm actually feeling. So I'm going to feel it later anyway. So why not just feel it in the moment and let it go? Drop into it, surrender into it. And so that's an experience of suffering is a perception. It's a perspective. And that at any moment in time, we can simply shift our perception and we'll be having a very different experience. I had a friend who had a child recently, and everyone has a different experience with childbirth, but she said it was just amazing, like ecstatic. And it was quick. It was very quick. She didn't have any worries in her mind. She wasn't creating a story of something negative happening. Therefore, her experience was like 10, 15 minutes, and she gave birth, and it was ecstatic. So you see, we have the opportunity when we use the tool of the mind to our advantage, we have an opportunity to transcend anything and everything. Anything and everything. I remember once an interview with a lama who was in China, tortured for 10 years in prison in China. And when he came out, I don't know how many years later it was, he was interviewed and they asked him, what was the greatest challenge in being in prison and being tortured? And he said very calmly, he said, I almost got angry once. I almost got angry once. And I was like, wow, that's what's possible. That's how powerful the mind is to transform whatever is happening in the moment to that which can be something transcendent, even though someone else would perceive it as pain and suffering.